welcome you to yet another episode of the Bald and Bonkers Show. On Saturdays and Sundays, check every inch of the web to find the latest episodes. The boys are everywhere, and no matter what anyone may try, they are here to stay. If the name hasn't warned you yet, then consider this as your viewer discretion advised. No one can restrain these two idiots, so here they come unleashed upon the world, only to become as insane as reality itself.
Well, reality certainly is getting strange. My name is Dakota France, and I am the specialist of the strange and host of the Bald and Bonkers Show. Today, ladies and gentlemen, it's just you and me. I wanted to come on here to move your damn chair. not more than just move the damn chair. I wanted to come on here to discuss some of the controversies surrounding those trying to make contact with alien greys. Because it seems that, well, let's face it, there's a lot of people who commented kind of confused about the alien grey situation when Chris and I were interviewing Elena Denon, and we asked about the black-eyed kids phenomenon. And she pointed out these kids are likely hybrids that were essentially forgotten about. And I'm extremely paraphrasing. And of course, people drew concern when she said that these kids should be accepted. You know, they're saying, "Oh, I thought we were supposed to ignore the Greys. I thought the Greys were all bad, blah, 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 blah." This is something that sort of falls into the blanket assumptions that several people make when it comes to the extraterrestrial phenomenon. And unfortunately, one can actually argue that it could be a basis for genuine racism. Now, I will say this. I know exactly the type of greys that Elena is talking about. She's referring to the ones that have been involved with the Orion Collective, that have abducted, experimented on, enslaved, trafficked so many individuals in their work with the Chikar Empire. Or the Sikar, or however the hell it's pronounced. And yeah, these individuals who are trying to contact with these beings, extremely careful. The ones that are trying to stay in contact ain't the good ones. And there's a number of individuals who are putting together their own little new age cults here on Earth. And individuals, I mean humans, that are putting almost a cult-like mentality. I've seen it unfold for myself. They target individuals who may have had some sort of ET contact, feed into whatever delusions of power that these individuals feel they're lacking. And what I mean by that is that these individuals that are often targeted could probably be considered lost souls in many different ways. They focus in on these people, feed into their egos, and slowly strip away their individuality. They feed into one's desire to simply become something more. And I find it funny that my signal seems to be acting up as I'm mentioning this. Don't worry, I'm not going to go off into a tangent. And Elena's right on so many levels. This is a last ditch effort because, again, if we openly offer consent, even consent by proxy through our political leaders, which is exactly what's happened for the last 40, 50, 60, 70 years, even, they will still have an opening. Many in the Galactic Federation, they have changed their directives in order to combat this more. They're getting fed up. But they also realize that they can't directly interfere with what's going on. Otherwise, we won't learn our lesson. And there goes the debate. There goes many of the we're facing now. Let's take situations of domestic abuse, just as an example. How many times have you heard stories of the abused defending their attackers? Saying, oh, they've been under a lot of pressure. Oh, they're really good people, blah, 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 blah. But in the end, there is no improvement. There is no chance to adapt. There is no betterment. The bruises just get worse and worse until one day the situation reaches its ultimate resolve. The only way for someone to actually escape that, because so many different systems failed them, the abusers succeeded in isolating their target from individuals they actually cared about, that would actually care about them, that would actually step in. Traits that so many young people these days seem to think is okay. And then they wonder why they're alone, that no one wants to deal with them. No one who's actually, genuine to their heart. If the average human can come up with such cruelties on their own, can you imagine what a race with a brain capacity and processing power up here that's several hundred times more efficient than the human brain could think of? A lot of the contacts within the Galactic Federation of Worlds, they advise that several of these very alien races, the ones we know as the Zerog or the Zeta Reticuli, they may be beyond the point of helping. They've been so eradicated, dumbed down, that it may be impossible for them to relieve themselves of the chains that they've been strapped to. And just like cycles of abuse, chances are moves from generation to generation to generation. And more often than not, so many people make the mistake of trying to hide the fact that the abuse is taking place in the beginning. Maybe going as far as, grandparents taking in the kids so the adults in the situations, the actual abusers, don't end up dead. or the kids don't end up in foster care. They try to preemptively move in and hide the fact that things are going on instead of actually stepping up to do something. And yes, it may be hard. No one wants to think of their relatives going through something like that. But unfortunately, this acceptance and mentality, this fear of offending people by calling out the fact that their lives may be in danger, is only doing more harm than good. And what people don't seem to realize is that incidents like that can leave genetic imprints. Okay? These things can happen for so long that perhaps it's some sort of evolution tactic that DNA has, to where it actually catalogs life events, right? Because for some reason, DNA thinks that if the parent goes through something, chances are the child is going to go through something similar. That's the environment. The child needs to have some sort of adaptation in place. Now, if the abuse is allowed to happen, a child comes into the relationship from an abusive parent, chances are that child will have a genetic disposition for violent outbursts. This does not mean, for those of you who are not paying attention to the entire videos that are getting put out, this does not mean the child is screwed to become just like their abusive parents. Absolutely not. It just means that they will have the potential, if not taken care of appropriately. The stressors of life that seem to be triggers for the abuser, the initial abuser, may eventually set off the child, but the child still has potential to break free. The reason why I'm saying this is because there's some of you, this is to kind of go back to the point of the Black Eyed Kids. There's a lot of people who start saying, oh, Black Eyed Kids have been around for a long time. Anybody who let them in had bad things happen. Yeah. Have you ever dealt with a child who was whose mother was addicted to drugs during pregnancy? I have. He was a good kid. When the mom realized she was pregnant, she cleaned up her act, but it was too late. The child was already basically addicted to drugs before he was even born. And he dealt with a lot of issues. Does he still? I don't know. The mom got a fairly decent job and moved him and the kid out of the state. So, her and the kid out of the state, I should say. So I honestly hope that kid's getting the help that he needs. Because who knows? They often say children are doomed to one of two pathways in life when it comes to situations involving their parents. They're either doomed to become their parents, or they spend their life against that. And unfortunately, there's a lot that lose that fight. But that fight can still be won. How does this involve the Black Eyed Kids? It could very well be that certain alien races have utilized these hybrid kids, or not even just alien races, deep state government actions, who have shown that they have no remorse. The types of training, the types of psychological profiles for people to be selected in those types of programs social isolation, no real connection to friends or family. If they have a tendency for violent urges, even better. Hell, they say that the official FBI estimate as far as the number of active serial killers at any given moment in the United States is 50. 50 active serial killers. You actually talked one-on-one with several of the agents. Some of them speculate that that number may actually be a lot higher. And when it comes to these black-eyed kids, the Gray hybridization program was an attempt to figure out how to transfer the soul to the Grays. Maybe on some level. This is going into speculation, okay? This is purely speculation. Maybe on some level, this may be an attempt for the Grays to try to regain themselves, the ones that have been oppressed. On the other hand, in a lot of ways, when you really think about it, the Grays mentality can be kind of perceived as a more complex version of Asperger's. Someone who's on the autism spectrum. I'm not saying people with autism are bad. I know I'm kind of jumping beforehand, but there's a lot of people who seem to jump to conclusions and not actually pay attention. And what I mean by that is that people with Asperger's tend to have a harder time processing visual cues when it comes to emotional states. Same thing for the Grays. The concept of the soul, they believed may have been a biological entity. It just like, a kidney transplant, as an example. When you think about it, soul transfers, reincarnation, and the phenomenon where, I don't know if there's an official label for it, and if anybody knows it, please feel free to share. The phenomenon where organ donors start to exhibit traits and recall memories and talents of the donors, of the organ donor. Which, when you think about it, can be very similar to how sometimes children who, for one reason or another, did not actually know their biological parents. For whatever case that may be. Whether it's something happened to the parents, or it's a situation where the kids were still in high school, clearly not ready to be full-time parents, and they decided to give the baby up for adoption. Whatever the case may be. Regardless of whatever kind of upbringing that child may have, chances are there's still going to be traits that come forward that resemble their biological parents. They're no fault of the kids. It just happens. And it's honestly unavoidable, to where, you see all these stories about parents trying to hide certain details from their children. Say, mother who messed around won't tell her kids who her biological father is. This is one example off of the top of my head, or basically situations like that. Or maybe the mother had a legitimate reason that the father may have been a legitimately dangerous individual. I'm going to tell you from personal experience, the second that kid has any inclination that they may have family out there, they're going to go looking. I unfortunately knew my father. He is currently spending the rest, what will likely be the rest of his life in prison right now for the things he did. And I also knew that my father didn't exactly like to keep his hands to himself. And that several women fell for him. I will say this. I can say that 1995 was probably a fairly good year for my father because 1996 he started having kids pop out, me included. Shortly after he went to prison, I had confirmation of something we already suspected, that I had long lost sisters out there. Little did I know that one of my long lost sisters was in my math class. I was about 14, 15 years old when this took place. The universe has a way of bringing people back together. So maybe some of these black-eyed kid abductions are these kids trying to find their families. The Galactic Federation of Worlds, if you actually read Elena Denon's book, We Will Never Let You Down, where she talks about encounters with Valthor, hybrids. She meets an individual from Talihara, which, for those of you who are wanting more information about my story, you're going to want to pay attention. They talk about how she talks about how the Federation actually takes some of the hybrids to be put on, to be sent to different worlds for basically an intergalactic adoption process. And that if the kids have a soul, which means in some cases the hybridization worked, the goal to integrate a human soul into the Gray Collective, it worked. There were some specimens that actually exhibited the soul. If for some reason they could not find a sustainable world where that being would be able to thrive and have the chance to become something better, they've admitted that they would put those beings out of their misery. If not, put them into adoption programs because they believe these beings had a chance. It was not their fault that they were created. These hybrid kids were rescued from deep state programs, MK Ultra-esque things. MK Ultra-esque programs. And just like the beings who were the people who were abducted, the kids aren't at fault for what their parents did. It's not the children's fault that happened. But the Federation believes in second chances. So the trouble with Greys is that we need to be careful about how we identify, how we move forward. Yes, we need to be careful, but we also got to realize that there's even that not all beings of the one race are bad. We need to stop making that assumption. That is a warning that several people have been trying to make. As a majority, when it comes to the warnings about the Greys, yeah, they're warning about the ones that are known to screw with people. But then again, there's also race out there that fit under the Gray genome that don't really care, don't really deal with humans. I mean, I believe there's one off the top of my head. It's the Eric. They're well known, very kind. They tend to fly around in ships that emit kind of an orange light, wobble, kind of hexagonal in shape. They're essentially intergalactic geologists. They don't really get involved with humans at all. In fact, October, Halloween of all days, October of 2021, I was actually about 20 feet away from one of their ships. And if anything, they were just as shocked to see me as I was to see them. Naturally, the second I had a chance to actually photograph the damn craft, they managed to get away. Bastards. Nah, I shouldn't say that. They likely had their reasons. But nevertheless, I love how my mic is cutting me out partially. Anyway, but nevertheless, the universe is a big place. And when it comes to trying to understand these species, it's a hell of a lot more complex than any book can potentially give us. Elena's books and classifications of the alien races, they do come in handy. I will not deny that. I personally use them when I go out on investigations, get reports of close encounters to try to help identify what type of species I may be dealing with, whether or not the person has anything to worry about. And let's face it, with the chaos that is the 2020, all bets are off really going on out there. But at the same time, until we know for sure what exactly we're dealing with, we have to be careful. Even with the ones that prove that they have the best intentions, we have to be careful. We have to stop taking this religious approach. And what I mean by religious approach is that we have to be very, very careful. Even with individuals like myself, Elena Denon, Alex Collier, this idolization we have that I've seen several people do, it sets up a dangerous precedence. Because even the good ones, they may fall short of expectations, and that unfortunately leads to some conflicts when people have been so dead set on certain ideals that they may react violently. Humanity is on the stepping stones to being truly ready to accept that there's other races out there. But we have to stop falling for the traps. We have to show more discretion. We have to open ourselves to truly being kind to one another, to truly coming forward about who we are. Not for any political or power gain, not for any business ventures, but just to understand and level ourselves with these other beings. And we have the potential to help make some truly beautiful and magnificent things come. But nevertheless, if we can't achieve that, which we have the potential, we can make it happen. If we cannot erase this urge to define ourselves, it's one thing to acknowledge where you may come from, your upbringing, your cultures. But to try to use that as an excuse to completely harm someone, to attack them, to attack individuals. Here, just gonna say it. I'm not a Harry Potter fan, but I heard enough of the fucking drama. It's like the LGBT or the trans community attacking people who decide to play a fucking video game instead of actually do anything, productive. Go on strikes outside Orlando. No, every political movement we have set forward, and no matter how noble the cause may have been with their original intentions, has been hijacked in order to cause more chaos. There's a reason why several figures throughout history who have been at the forefront of these political movements, who have had some sort of grand influence over a sizable amount of people, have had federal profiles. Bob Marley, Martin Luther King Jr., Marilyn Monroe. Anybody who was seen as taking a position of grand influence is monitored. Because if they have the wrong intentions, they can easily incite acts of terrorism. And like I said, no matter how noble the cause may have been at first, corrupt individuals have historically been the first one to realize the potential and the potential of what it may bring them. Not bring to the masses, bring to them, to gain some sort of aspect of control, because in order to, you know what, let's just say it, it's likely to fulfill some sort of personal issues, to try to compensate for low self-image. But if we if our movements take on more of the role to gain the power over others, to abuse others, like we have felt abused at some point, are we not just becoming just like the enemy? What does that have to do with grace? You have to realize that no matter where someone may come from, whether it's another country, another star system, another completely different genome, we all have parallels in which can unite us. We all have fears which can either unite or divide us. Look at Ronald Reagan's infamous lines about some alien threat from outside this world uniting the countries of the world. Uniting the countries. How quickly our differences would be set aside to go up against a common enemy. Look at how the beginning of the pandemic, how much more willing people were just to have common courtesy, to check up on their neighbors. See, at my day job right now, I actually work in a grocery store. When the pandemic started, you want to know what we all did for each other? Because so many people were buying out damn near everything in the store. Those of us who worked overnights, we would offer to help stash each other. We would try to make sure that if we had to do any shopping, we do it before the store even opens, so that way we can just either stash it somewhere in the store or stash it in our cars and get the hell out. You've seen people offer to take baby food, supplies to houses that were on lockdown because someone may have tested positive or were awaiting test results. And granted, and after a while, it seemed like everybody was getting violent with one another. We don't have to dig into any conspiracy to understand that the reason why people started getting more hostile towards one another is because we all faced stressors that were beyond our control, and that bothers us. By screaming out that something is wrong, we feel that we have some sort of control. But in the end, each individual has to take power for themselves before they try to align themselves with anybody else. In that way, the cause becomes a lot stronger. People must be willing to stand on their own and stand for what's truly right. What's not right is the total manipulation that we have undergone over the years. The manipulation that we do to one another. You do realize the CIA, all these deep state programs, they don't have to do much in order to cause chaos in the world, right? Why do you think all of a sudden the talks of UFOs being shut down were taking place right about the time when the Epstein client list was supposed to release? People in power are scared and they're going to retaliate. Just like we have found ourselves in times where we are scared and we harm each other. When in reality, if people actually stopped being such fucking morons, stop looking to take these concepts of the paranormal, of extraterrestrial influence, of trying to take that in for themselves. And don't you dare try to say I'm doing any of that. Yes, I have a platform to stand up, and yes, I have a platform to utilize. But I'm here just trying to help figure out what the fuck is going on. That's been my intention from day one. It's not about power. It's not about any of that. It's about making sure we do what's right and making sure that those we work with and stand by do what's right as well. Can you imagine how far in the world we could go if we actually tried to help each other? Stop getting so defensive over matters that we know are wrong, but we are more afraid about being called out than actually fixing the problem. Fear is the ultimate suicide bomb. You may harm several others, but in the end, acting in fear and in anger only causes more damage to you. You may be able to harm others, and there may be ways where you can channel those emotions into more productive means. I'll admit it, I've had a temper for most of my life. I've worked on it. People who have been around the longest have said that I've gotten a lot better about it. So good on me. Pat on the back. But I still have to find methods in order to make sure that I don't screw up the good things I have coming. The good things that are coming for everybody. The trouble with Grays is that they realize that we were just as vulnerable as they once were. The short Zetas. The tall ones, they're too far gone. These quantum healing sessions with talking about Grays that you hear about, be very, very careful. Investigate everything with anything you can think of. Investigate anybody who comes out. Ask questions. Because granted, there's certain topics that Chris and I have brought up on this show that we can't necessarily test, that we can't necessarily prove. There's aspects of that about my life, even though Chris has seen plenty of action coming from me that he doesn't believe. And I have a hard time believing half the shit that comes out of his mouth because he can't stay consistent. I'll say it. But I still love the guy like a brother. I know that there's something there that needs to be worked on. It's just that he don't fucking listen. Like, see, that's why I haven't made the t-shirt in our Etsy store. I'm funny because murder is illegal. But the troubles with Grays is that they've once been in the position we are now, and they lost. And right now, we're winning. We're winning this fight. And we're going to see some extraordinary things coming in the next few years. But in that same aspect, we're going to see a lot of chaos. Storms are not the product of chaos. The storms are products of correcting chaos. And there's a storm coming. So batten down the hatches. Shit's about to get real.